Welcome everyone. I have a multitasking topic here because I have my laptop and I also need to do the slides, but I'll try to get this organized. So welcome after lunch. It's not an easy slot after lunch because you guys have eaten a lot and it was good. And so please help yourself with the sugar on the table. And I'm also trying to keep you awake and make you also excited about what we can offer here with GET.invest. So when I was preparing, I was thinking about a tagline after lunch, so what would be a good intro, and I have to say I was a little bit inspired by Inati this morning, when he talked about his hotel experience, and I have to say, I thought about this, and working for the German government, I don't get goodies in the hotels, maybe that's part of the reality. But then I looked around and I thought, like, this is really interesting because everything in this hotel room is actually related to energy. Yeah? There's the geyser making the hot water, there's the fridge, there's the air condition. I charge my phones, I charge my laptop. So it's electricity all over the place. And then I realized that's actually sort of the goodie or the gift I can, in a way, be thankful or also be happy about. That sort of there's utilities or utility, there's government, there's financiers making all this happen, making electricity network available, making electricity available in my hotel room, on every day and in every place. So that's something I realized I can also be happy about. So it is a gift I received in my hotel room, and it also requires a private sector to make electricity available there, and this is what I want to talk about today, because GET.invest is really focusing on the private sector, and we are all aware of the challenges in the energy sector here, but also on a global level. The need for more clean and green energy, obviously the need for stable supply. I think load shedding was mentioned already earlier today, so that's a topic we are looking into. And last but not least, and I'm moving closer to my topic, it's the generation side. And I was listening very closely this morning to what's planned also for Eswatini, and it is on-grid, it is off-grid, and both is mainly driven by the private sector. So the private sector needs to take a key role in pushing this forward, pushing this transition towards a sustainable and green and clean energy in Eswatini. So based on that, I have to say I'm very proud to be able to present GET.invest now to you, which is the private sector component of GET.pro, which is, okay, sorry, now I need to do the slides. Well, we can still, this it is. Happy to present now GET.invest European program, which is also supported by its member states, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Austria, and also obviously the European delegation here on the ground. And I'm also proud to mention, it's not on the slide here yet, but that Norway has now also decided to join our contributors, so another European member state joining us, which we are very proud of, based on our track record. I'm starting with a slide. I'm not sure if you're able to read this. I realized that from back there it's actually a bit blurred, so the details I can also tell you. This is a slide which is more than 6 years old in terms of content, so don't be afraid. But actually the topic still holds true, which I will talk about here, and this topic is still relevant until I would say the global community has reached net zero emissions. Because what we understood before we started with designing GET.invest is that there is enough capital, but there's not enough bankable projects. And that's something you can hear a lot, whoever you talk to in terms of financiers, when you talk to governments, everyone says, like, yes, we do have money, there is money available. We will also discuss this tomorrow in the roundtable event a bit further. But what is there is a lack of bankable projects. And this is exactly the private sector which needs to be supported to get there. So bankability is influenced by several factors. structure the project, the proposition, identify the finance, and also negotiate with the financiers. And based on this understanding on how we need to enable the private sector to make more bankable projects, GET.invest was designed with the idea that if we support projects and project developers to make more viable projects available and help them to really move across the last hurdles on the way to being bankable, and then even further do the matchmaking and do the introduction to the financiers, stay with the projects and project developers as an honest broker on their side, talk to the financiers. If we do all this, then we are very much convinced that we can actually do more and bring more projects towards finance. So that was the idea years ago, and I'm really proud that by today now GET.invest is really the leading European program on mobilizing investments in renewable energy, based on this assessment we did years ago. And we're building a pipeline of investment-ready projects, and that's a lot. I will show you in one of the next slides. We are also very proud that we've been announced the Team Europe one-stop shop for green energy investments recently. And we do support all relevant delivery models, on-grid, off-grid. Also in terms of technology, we are very agnostic because we follow the private sector, we follow the need, we follow their demand. We have a broad partner network. I think that's become clear here, and we are active not only in Eswatini, but also in Sub-Saharan Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, and our value donors already mentioned on the first slide. So how do we do this? What is the scope of services we provide? That's on the next slide. This is really hard to read, so I'm happy to share also the slides afterwards. I'm sure you can get them. So, and also, please don't forget to access our website. On the website, you'll find everything you need to know on GET.invest. So how do we do this? We do provide information, market data. We do have on the website a couple of country deep dives available, market assessments. We provide information on financing solutions. We do work on a fully digital monitoring platform right now called Prospect to integrate into our activities. We do mobilization activities like I would say this one. We work with ARE, we work with Gogla, we work with others, with AMDA, on conferences, on several different occasions where we present us, and we also are actually meeting the ones which we want to meet, and that's the private sector, the businesses and developers. And all this we actually do to do what we want to do, and that is supporting the projects and the companies, and that's the big box here on the right side. I don't know how this pointer here works, that's this box here on the right side. We do have the finance catalyst and we do have the finance readiness support, and this is the core of GET.invest, supporting the projects and businesses on their way to bankability. We've recently added also working with the financial sector. That's the finance system advisory, the smaller little box, green box here in the middle, because we understood there's two sides to the coins. There's the projects and businesses, but there's also the financiers. And while we work a lot with the financiers, we now also started to actually educate them, train them, build capacity, especially with the local financial sector, the domestic financiers. I have the ability and the pleasure to actually present this part of our activities and also the recently added finance readiness support activity. I think it is tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. So today I want to focus on the finance catalyst, which is the core of our activities. And these numbers here, I'm also not sure if you can read them, but I will tell you, this is really the big success we are proud of. This is the number of companies, projects which have applied to us over the last 6 years since we initially designed this concept, almost 1,500 of them. And out of these, we supported more than 400 projects until since then. What's interesting to note here, that we then introduced them to financiers. Once we supported them in building their project case, and we introduced them to more than 900 financiers, or more than 900 introductions. It's not 900 financiers, but we know them all. We have a big database of more than 150 of available financiers, and we've done more than 900 introductions. You would wonder why with 424 projects. The reason is that many projects we are supporting are actually needing structured finance, equity, debt, maybe even some grant components. So many of the projects we supported are in a structured finance situation. So there's a lot of introduction to the financiers. We currently have almost 200 of these projects in the portfolio, and more than 160 have already been accepted by the financiers, banks, funds, and 84 have reached financial close. Looking at the numbers on the right side, if you can see that these financial closes only are sort of the equivalent of 420 million of euros actually already invested. If we look at all the projects which have been accepted by financiers are in the current process of due diligence, of closing, moving towards financial close, that's more than 2 billion euros of investment equivalent. And we are very proud of this, that we have achieved this in the last couple of 6 years, since we have sort of had this idea based on the slide I showed you, and have now reached almost 2 billion euro investments. By doing this, we also provided about 16.7 million people with access to energy, saved 5 million tons of CO2 per year. And I could talk much more about this. Of course, you are very, very aware of, it's not only the electricity, the energy, it's also all the other effects involved in the social effects, education, health, and so on and so on. But given the time, I'm not going into details here. I rather show you 2 examples to keep you awake and also show you how things actually work in detail. We have here in the room, I think Chai Musoni, are you here? If not, I will introduce you later. We also have Art Dankers here. These are 2 of the advisors we are working with, because you would wonder how we actually do this, how we achieve these numbers. And of course, it's a people's business, so we have a team of external advisors. These are really seasoned, experienced, either own project developers or financiers, which have been in the business since a long time, many of them based in also here in the region. That's the 2 I'm going to introduce to you later on. They're not here right now. Art Dankers in South Africa, Chai Musoni in Zimbabwe, for example. And these are the ones sort of which are on the ground for us and work with the actual businesses and companies. And they sit with them, and this can take a month, this can take years, this can be sort of with intermittent waiting times, waiting for a permit, waiting for some other figures of a couple of months, nothing happening, but then still being in contact, still being in touch. And this is like every project, every company we support has a dedicated assigned advisor from our side, assigned to, and that's the contact point which we work through. And this person, as I said, has the experience and brings the knowledge required to bring a project to bankability. On top of that, we have structured this in a way that there's also backup experience. So if this advisor realizes, okay, I need to look into credit management, for example, then he would ask one of the other colleagues from the advisory team, saying like, okay, you know credit management, can you come in the advisory team? I mentioned this here because SolarWorks, that's a Mozambican project, I think is a good example of how we worked there. It's been over several years support. It's a solar home company, including paygo, but not only, also cash sales. They were in need of finance, different kind of structured finance, equity, but also debt, to expand and grow in Mozambique, but also expand to other countries. And we've worked with them over several years now. We're also very happy that in the end we were able to arrange a deal with Electrify. Electrify is also, I think, in the room here, current term, but it's the also European funded investment opportunity, which we work closely with. So you will hear a presentation on Electrify as well. So working with SolarWorks over several years, we managed not only to arrange a first round of financing, then also a second round of financing. And this is sort of the ideal case of projects we want to see. Start early, help them grow, maybe expand into other markets, and then further grow and scale. That's an example I wanted to share with you. The other one I picked, we have tons of examples, and please check our website. There's all these stories and cases. The other one I just picked briefly was Burundi, because I thought this is interesting because it's an IPP. It's a size very viable also for a country like Eswatini, 7.5 megawatt. It was very complex, first of its kind in the country, but even there we were able, yes, thanks, 2 minutes, I'm almost done. Even there, we have been able to mobilize finance in a very complex process, but it's been successful in the end. Yeah. So that's another example. Solar IPP, it's possible. It was the first one in the country. It was also awarded. And yes, I'm looking forward to applications and projects here in Eswatini as well. And sorry, that was the wrong slide. This was the Burundi Gigabyte Global project. Didn't work the remote. Yeah, last 2 slides, 2 minutes left. I mentioned already what do we do. Everything grid connected, commercial, CNI, e-mobility, clean cooking, mini grids. So on market segments, we are very open, very clear, as long as it's clean and sustainable energy. Geography is also clear. And then the last slide, if you're a project, if you're a business, if you're a developer, please go on our website. There's the apply here button. It's super easy. If you want support, it's free of charge. You know, it's provided to you by our donors and by obviously then implemented by our consultants. And there is a vetting process, but it's always open, so you can always apply. So there's no calls. You can always apply with project ideas, and then we come back to you and might have some additional questions. And if it's a viable project, we're happy to take it on into our pipeline and ideally take you all the way from application, as you've seen earlier, through the support to the introduction to the financier and all the way to financial close. So looking forward to that in Eswatini, and please approach me for any further questions on this.
Thank you very much. My apologies to cut such a brilliant presentation, but the good news, the good news is that you will have the email, and you'll just be able to click on that link there if you need support. And I do believe private sector would be wanting to tap into GET.invest. And we're moving right along to a bit of an exciting part of our sessions today. We've traveled 12 months to November 2023, and now we want to find out the way forward. And we have a capable moderator from the Eswatini Economic Policy Analysis and Research Center, ESEPAC, a capable moderator, Dr. Thabo Sakolo, is going to be leading this session. The session aims to discuss openly the role that the public and the private sector players can play to advance the energy transition in Eswatini further. So we're going to be looking at the next months as well and years. Of course, ESEPAC has hosted many very important national events like the Economic Forum, the National Economic Conference. So our moderator is more than well equipped, and he has brilliant panelists that are coming up, including managing directors in the public space. Ladies and gentlemen, without taking much of your time, please give a round of applause to Dr. Thabo Sakolo. Since it's after lunch, can we give him a round of applause until he gets here? So we stay awake.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Yes, the after lunch slot is very tricky, but I've learned over the few years of career that before lunch we are too hungry to concentrate. After lunch we are a bit too full to concentrate. And common sense and logic says, let's put it right in the middle during lunchtime. But we are too busy to concentrate. We eat the delicious meal. So there is no winning. So I learned to be indifferent between the morning and the afternoon session. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Thabo Sakole, as I've been introduced. I come from CEPAC, which is a think tank looking at economic policy analysis and research in Eswatini. So before I introduce my panelists, let me just take a few minutes to just recap. I know the speakers in the morning did a very good job in terms of summarizing where we come from last year. But what I like about the theme for this year, which is not far from the theme for last year, is the catalyzed part. We are cognizant of the fact that this process would happen anyway, but the pace at which it happens, we don't like it, we want to fast track it. Those who had the privilege to sit in chemistry class, you will remember that if you want to fast track a process, you introduce some enzymes, and if you introduce some enzymes, you have to keep the temperature or the conditions at an optimal level for the operations of those enzymes. Hence, we have the regulator who makes sure that we moderate the space for our private sector players to operate. So, in the previous year, in the previous edition of this, we had a strong sentiments towards sustainable energy in the future, but we also illuminated the critical role different stakeholders play in the transformation journey. We also got insight from the regulator on the landscape and also the assistance that they got through this program in terms of a capacity development within the regulator, because we also want our regulator to be cognizant and be up to date with the things that are happening so that they don't stifle the growth in industry. So we really appreciate that one. But we also got a view from the utility, which is EEC, which was giving us the perspective on both the opportunities and risk and threats around this whole initiative. Because as we are going forward, we have learned that in as much as we do things with good intentions, but we might be surprised with other things that we don't want to see, and the better we prepare ourselves for that, the more the odds will be on our side to get what we want to get. Business Eswatini gave us the business perspective of the green power transformation and also highlighting the role that private sector can play in that endeavor. Finally, we had GIZ, who provided the global context, drawing experience from other countries in terms of outlining the key action steps of the power system transformations assessment. So this time around, with my colleagues, we were talking, is it not too soon to have this second edition? What has happened? But from what I heard this morning, a lot has happened in a very short space of time. And given the fact that changes happen so fast, so we have to meet even when we have to discuss that we have nothing to discuss. We have to meet and then come up with something going forward. But for this meeting, we are meeting to discuss more than that. We are meeting to discuss progress. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I will invite my very capable panelists, and that's the one correct thing that my moderator said. I'm not sure about the SEPAC being, or the Thabo being capable and stuff, but we will see about that. But my panelists, they are more than capable, and I'm happy to invite them on stage. The first one will be Thabile Nkosi, who is the Director Energy at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Energy. Please, Director, join the stage. The second one will be Skhumbuzo Tsabetse, who is the CEO from Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority, ESERA. Please, Mr. Tsabetse. And then the third one is Minister Ernest Mkonta, Managing Director of the Eswatini Electricity Company, EEC. Please. And then my next speaker is Olof Marias, Engineering Manager at Royal Eswatini Sugar. And then the next one is Anthony Geldert, CEO, Logico. Last but not least, we have Johan Roberts, Fleet and Property Manager at Tabangulu Estate. Okay. I also thought it would be proper to kickstart this one with just a few seconds of confession, so that you know who to blame in case you don't get enough information. They used to say things will happen when you least need them to happen. When I was trying to send my moderators some discussion points and all this that they need to prepare for this one, the email decided to get stuck on my outbox, only to realize on Sunday. So if maybe what they present, you think it falls short of, you would have loved to hear, you know who to blame. It's me. So thank you very much, panelists, for your time. I think we will kickstart our discussion. You would have some 5-7 minutes to give us your thoughts, so that we reserve some 20-25 minutes for our panelists. And given that I've already consumed some 5 or so minutes, which I was allocated, so that lands us on the 75 minutes. I will not complain about the few minutes that was stolen by Sebastian. It will be a story for another day. So maybe if we can start this thing from the government perspective. To you, Director Energy, if maybe you can assist us in understanding, in the context of Eswatini energy landscape, could you elaborate on the specific strategies and policies that government is considering to foster an enabling environment for the private sector investment in renewable energy? Maybe whilst at that, Director, you can also highlight at high level which renewable energy technologies do you believe are most suitable for rapid implementation in Eswatini, and which should be primarily driven by the private sector. Thank you. Over to you, Director.
Thank you, Program Director. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm Tabi Lenkosi, Director Energy, as already introduced. And I must say, as government, we are very happy about this forum, because forums like this are a step in the right direction, where we get to discuss openly on issues affecting the energy sector, because that's where, as government, you also get input from key stakeholders like yourselves. And also for us, we do have policies and strategies in place, but policies and strategies need to be continuously checked. We need to monitor if they are achieving the desired outcome, so that we are able to update them, we are able to close gaps if there are any gaps, and those gaps mainly will be pointed out by our stakeholders. Getting into the question of the specific policies and strategies that are being considered by government, you might have heard in the morning in the presentations that we do have policies in place that are allowing private sector participation in the sector. We talked about the Electricity Act 2007, which is a key in terms of liberalizing the sector, allowing the private sector to participate. We have energy policy. So we do have policies, but these policies we need to continuously improve. Recently, we have reviewed our energy master plan of 2034, now covering the period up to 2050. because the Energy Master Plan is a critical document, national document for guiding the development of the energy sector. It provides a clear roadmap so that even the private sector can expect in terms of which are that even the technologies that government is looking into developing. From the Energy Master Plan of 2050, we are then to come up with another short-term generation expansion plan, because the one that we had, that the regulator is using to procure the solar energy as well as biomass, that one we can confidently say that it's being implemented, because even the projects will mostly hear from the SERA are almost at finalization in terms of even awarding of the tenders, especially the solar one. So now as government, we have to then come up with another short-term generation expansion plan that will derive from the master plan that we've just reviewed. That's an exercise that we are busy working on, and will ensure that we consult stakeholders as much as possible. Because these are the documents that then will even guide the regulator in terms of what technologies to procure next following the 75 megawatt solar and the 40 megawatt biomass. We are also prioritizing issues of energy efficiency. Renewable energy and energy efficiency, they should go together to achieve the desired outcome in the energy transition. So we will be focusing mainly on energy efficiency for all economic sectors. Currently, we are focusing mainly on households, domestic households, but we want to now to focus on also industry, as well as issues of off-grid solutions that also include mini-grids. We are busy working on a framework of the mini-grid deployment that will also be talking to productive use of energy, and that's where the private sector will also have a role. I must say that we're now in the last mile of rural electrification. The Honorable Minister talked about us being at 82% access. So the last 18% we of the view that renewable energy will play a role in terms of electrifying those remaining households. So we are looking into solar home systems as well. And we are also focusing on solar water pumping systems. The idea is to provide a complete a package to the rural households so that they have electricity, and that electricity they have should be affordable. Remember, our target of ensuring access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy. So us now also bringing solar is to try and lessen now the burden to the households in terms of the cost. And therefore, we are of the view that they will also be in a position to even start know the productive use. They can even start businesses. So it's more of energy as well, also for agriculture, food provision, because if they are able to pump water cheaper using the solar, then I think we're in the right track in terms of also ensuring that they are able to also produce food through irrigation at cheaper. We are also focusing on the presentation by Mzwandile touched on, we're reviewing our Electricity Acts so that we align with latest developments in the energy sector. And we are also focusing on the e-mobility, because renewable energy, energy transition should cover the entire energy sector. Petroleum is also key. So we're working on a policy of e-mobility. You will agree that electric vehicles are approaching so fast. So we also want to be ready in that aspect. So we will also be consulting stakeholders on that e-mobility policy that we are to start soon, as well as ethanol blending. We're finalizing our regulations for the blending of ethanol with unleaded petrol. Then the question that is talking on the renewable energy projects that we foresee in the future, those ones will be documented in our short-term generation expansion plan. But preliminary, we are seeing largely solar PV that will come in. We had solar in the previous short-term generation expansion, but even now solar is likely to come in, but it will come, we are considering the utility scale battery storage because of the intermittency. We cannot have high capacity for solar, so we have to also consider. So we're assessing that in our new short-term generation expansion plan, as well as we have assessed, the Honorable Minister mentioned 80 megawatts biomass. We've assessed that, and there is potential. So the regulator will explore that one further. There are hydropower plants which will be developed through the public-private partnership. Some will be developed by our utility. And we are also exploring, Honorable Minister was also talking about balancing. Whilst we develop renewable energy, we should also be considering the base load. So we're looking into options of base load that will talk to natural gas. We are happy as well that, the financial institutions are now joining. They've structured their funding to also now focus on renewable energy. Thank you so much. I think for the ministry, we really understand that for us to move faster, public-private partnership is the way to go. It's the instrument that will enable the power transformation to be executed faster, because issues of funding, issues of innovation, and even the implementation of the project, those will come from the private sector. As government, we just need to make, to enable the environment. And please assist us. We are open by recommending where you feel there needs to be improvements in our policies and strategies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director, for that. I'm glad that you touched on the issue of productive use of energy, because in one of our interactions, one of our assignments at ESEPAC, we had as one of our findings that in Eswatini we use electricity mainly for lighting. So there is a need to use electricity as an input in production. So I'm happy that our ministry is already looking into that. So now let's turn to the referee, which is Sarah, who levels the playground and making sure that all the players, they play on an equal turf. The ground isn't tilted to favor one player. So CEO, for you, could you please discuss the steps Sarah has taken to facilitate the transition of renewable energy tenders from competitive bidding to tangible projects supplying power to the national grid? And whilst at that, CEO, please also touch base on the plans to increase both the scale and number of the projects to enhance the private sector contribution to the national energy mix. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Dr. Sakolo, and ladies and gentlemen, I greet you. Yeah, he referred to me as a referee, and I'm an avid follower of Arsenal. I can say that safely because they're doing well these days. But having said that, a referee, whether you win, you lose, or you play a draw, is always a fellow to blame. Doesn't matter. Somehow, that is the role of a regulator, to try and just balance the game and ensure that we open the industry through legislation for other players. But the specific question details progress in terms of the ongoing projects for procurement. If I understand it well, Dr. Sakolo. Where we are in terms of the key word would be competitive bidding. Quite frankly, we have a very interesting. Oh, it's run out of battery. But very briefly, where we are. Regrettably, I think when we spoke last year, we had truly anticipated that by this time the projects would be on the ground. Just to give a little bit of background, I think the Act basically provides that all new generation capacity must be auctioned. The initial auction that was issued was for 40 megawatts, SICA, 45 megawatts. We had disputes. I think it is not unnatural for projects of this magnitude to be sometimes challenged if there is a flow or perceived flow. Nonetheless, I think we migrated to what then did not become a pure auction. All the shortlisted bidders were actually given projects. Just to give context in terms of what the minister presented on the 75 megawatts, because some of you may be asking themselves, initially it was 40, how come we ended up with 75? I think we ended up with a negotiations just to establish how much would the grid be able to absorb in the first tranche. I note the director is actually indicating that likely growth is bound to continue in the solar space, whether private, from private industry, or from within the utility. But in doing the assessment of what the grid can accommodate, we came up with 75, and all the shortlisted bidders, negotiations were entered into, and the matter was settled. We are in these negotiations. Maybe I do need to give a little bit of context. They are not as easy as they may look, particularly when you are procuring, when you have about 4 or 5 projects simultaneously by different companies. To come to a consensus requires a lot of support, assistance, and skill. Nonetheless, where are we with the project? I think we are happy to say that we are at the verge of crossing the line. We anticipate that by the end of this very month, we should be able to finalize negotiations. We've already appointed a project implementation team so that these projects are fully realized. We are under extreme pressure because by 2025, these projects need to be on the ground. I do want to emphasize one additional issue here. Notwithstanding that we are saying the projects are going to be there, we are still extremely mindful that the economy must be able to absorb the unit price. So it becomes very difficult to negotiate when you are in a desperate position, because there is a lot of pressure. Interestingly, you also get a lot of offers and to say that, we can do this plant for so much. We can do this plant quicker than, but these are unsolicited bids. But our view is that we think the project is very close to the crossover line. We anticipate to start launching these projects. The good thing is that each one of these companies, independent of each other, are not going to start the projects necessarily simultaneously. The earliest and the most ready company will be able to move towards project implementation. I think that's on the first part of the question. The second part of the question, if I'm not mistaken, relates to envisaged energy mix going forward. Our view is that it's already been mentioned by Director Tabile next to me, that the 80 megawatts of assessed biomass has already been evaluated and the regulator has indicated that we will launch this one next year. We are currently procuring the additional 40 megawatts. Again, we envisage that by the end of the year, we would have arrived at the first stage of awarding the tenders to the preferred bidders so that it can move to financial close by mid next year. Then once we complete that process, we will launch the 80 megawatts. Needless to say, we need to be extremely mindful as a country that when we talk of available biomass in the country, we are largely talking about bagasse, and it generally is not available for a period of 12 months. So bridging and ensuring that we structure our tenders, I think what becomes very important is to understand that when you structure your RFP or RFQ documents, you must be extremely cognizant of the nature and type of fuel you have in your own country, because you may actually be using a standard template and end up with no project. So I am suggesting, or we are learning from the previous bids, that perhaps the structure of the next tranche of biomass needs to speak, as the Act also provides, with the nature and type of fuel. So we do envisage an additional, maximum of 80 megawatts. It may actually be less, but we will rely on industry, private industry participating in this space. So I would like to end there, Sakolo. I hope I covered your questions.
Babem Konda, I also have 2 questions for you. And maybe the first one will be, how does EEC envisage its role in evolving in the landscape where private sector participates in power generation is on the rise? But also, Tungwane, may you please also just touch on the issues in terms of the green transformation. Which technologies do you see from the perspective of EEC as having the most potential in Eswatini? We know that different technologies holds different promise, but from your perspective as the utility, which ones would foster both the robust market for the private sector, but also maintain sustainability? Because those are the 2 things that we are trying to balance. We don't want a grid that are vulnerable to EMA shocks. We want to maintain, in as much as we are bringing up the other guys, but sustainability is also key. If maybe you can touch on those 2 things, MD, over to you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I am going to extinguish you pretty soon. Mr. Sakolo, or Dr. Sakolo, thank you very much for these 2 questions. I will begin with the first one. And I will start from the point of view of our strategy from the EEC. We recognize that public participation alone cannot fulfill the country's needs. So public-private partnerships are key. And it is one of our strategic initiatives to partner with key clients and also key investors in the sector. And we do so by default as the operator of the grid as well. Wherever you want to access within the market, you have to go through our grid. So we are open to that, and we are transforming ourselves and getting ourselves ready to accept the private players into the grid. Now, the key issue when it comes to grid is equal access to the grid. But equal access to the grid needs to be taken into context. Different projects will have different pricing structures. And you want to maintain a good average selling price to the consumers, because the reality is that electricity needs to remain accessible as well as affordable and reliable to all parties in the economy. Now, our main outcome out of this is that we need to serve as a catalyst for the economic growth in the country. And we cannot do so without a reliable grid. Therefore, it is important that we also invest a lot on grid stability technologies to make sure that those energy generators don't become stranded because grid is unavailable at that particular point in time. It will be disastrous for their economy as well as ours. Now, it is also important that while we look at that, we also recognize that we are no longer dealing with a pure customer. Some of our customers are becoming producers of electricity. As you heard in the earlier presentation, that we are collaborating with the regulator to establish a framework for small-scale embedded generators. That should allow those customers that generate a surplus to sell to the grid and thus contribute to the energy mix in the country. Now, it is important, therefore, for the EEC to make sure that we operate a stable grid, a fair market, to allow all sectors of the economy to access and play in the marketplace as well. Now, if you look at other areas as well, as an EEC, having done the assessment of the demographies of our customers, we have a huge number of customers in the domestic sector and a very small number of industrial and commercial customers. And therefore, for us as a utility, we need to make sure that we also look at how we have structured our tariff so that we are able to meet all our expenses and maintain and grow the grid as well, so that we meet the target of universal access as well as a reliable grid. Now, it is important, again, while we do so, to make sure that as a grid operator, we provide a stable supply. Your next question relates to what I perceive as the biggest contributor to the generation. Now, if you look at the country's resources, we have abundant sunshine. Yes, it is not as abundant as it is in the Northern Cape and Namibia, but we have sufficient irradiance in the country to generate through solar. However, our experience with solar, and that is the utilities experience now, it is not what we have read in the books. We have a 10 megawatt power plant in the southern parts of the country, and we monitor its generation operation throughout the day and every day. And I get those reports on a daily basis. It is a reality that solar is still an intermittent source of supply. On days when we have a complete cloud cover, the production is less than 5% of its capability. And on a good day, we have a good production. Now, what does that do to the economy? It puts a lot of stress and pressure on the utility to make sure that we have a balance of power that will be available to customers in the event that solar is not available. And that will happen. And at night, again, the solar is not available. We have also done an experiment on a mini-grid system, which is completely off-grid. It's supported by batteries, and we understand that the investments required for that over a 7-year period of life of the batteries, that is an expensive source of supply. However, we need to meet the needs of our customers as well. So that again has provided us with enough information to understand the behavior of a mini-grid system over a period of time, especially when we have cloud cover. Another source of supply that we could be looking at, as the regulator has mentioned, is the biomass. However, there has to be alignment of operation within the players that support us with biomass. Because if they have a shutdown at the same time, then they leave the grid stranded, we need to find electricity elsewhere. Now, as a utility, we are also looking at how we can support baseload, and there are various technologies that we are looking at, and our priority is on what is currently available, but we are open to new technologies as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MD, for those very insightful points. I'm glad that you explicitly mentioned that government alone is not sufficient to take us where we want to go. That re-emphasizes the importance of the participation both in the panel and on the ground of the private sector. And that's a very good way to set the scene and put a little bit of pressure on the private sector players to tell us what is it that we can expect from their side. Now I'll move to Olaf Marias. I also have two questions for you, sir. Maybe the first one would be from the perspective of a key player in the private sector, what tangible steps do you think are necessary to shift Eswatini green power transformation from vision to reality? As you are the people who are making things happen, the doers, the people who move concept to projects. So what can you suggest in that one? And maybe whilst at that, please could you also share insights into any key projects that the private sector is ready to embark on in the short to medium term? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Program Director, and all protocols observed. I think to sum it up, basically it's two elements. It's enabling environment and airtime. Now, in terms of the enabling environment, on the energy side, there's been lots of progress made in terms of these various forums, and specifically also the GET Pro initiatives. But what we tend to see on ground level is that it's not really filtering through to us. Specifically, the one element that I'd like to refer to is the up to 80 megawatts of biomass. That's been sort of hauled in its haunches because of the other two tenders, the 40 megawatt biomass and the 75 megawatt solar. So as industry, we are actually held back to action that we can't actually go out to tender in full in terms of understanding, bring in lenders and say, listen, there's this opportunity and how to action it. So from our side, that's actually being a hindrance for us, the fact that the 40 and 75 has been dragging out a bit. That points to the lenders. The lenders need security and government's buy-in. It's been there in word, but we're still missing it in action. Other element is on the legislation side of things. Being in the sugar sector, the Sugar Act itself is not fully enabling. It is a dated act. It was established in '67 as most other acts. And from our perspective, it's actually due time to get in and review it in the different aspects that there are in terms of the opportunities, actually in terms of what it holds in the form of sugar and then fiber. And then in terms of other elements, other outside the energy sector itself, for us to be actually become a player in the environment itself, in the large-scale power generation environment, is something such as transport. I've alluded in the previous session as well. What we need to be able to get to is, should we have to transport biomass, we need to be able to do it cost effectively, which might entail a revisit, not might, it will have to entail a revisit into the transport sector to make sure that we can tap into the new ventures like SA, for instance, has gone in, all those trucks that's currently clogging the roads. Basically venture into larger capacity transport within the limitations of the law. That's elements like that we are actually in need of. In terms of funding itself, if we look at the big projects, and jumping back to the Sugar Act limits to an extent the millers specifically to be able to just go into the large power or large capital layouts because of the way the Act is structured. And that is one of the key elements that we'll need to look into to revisit over and above the splitting of fiber and the sucrose energy components thereof. To speak towards our medium-term plans, we've actually been, for the past year and a bit, we've been venturing into the market in order to be able to go to large scale, and that's where the airtime portion comes in. Middle last year, we went out on a tender for energy consultant to enable us to go out to have a fully structured bid. The intention was to have it closely aligned to what SA has done in terms of their bid process. We circulated that tender within the internal Eswatini news media. We circulated in the SA media. We circulated via an energy forum in SA. We had 4 responses. So, and the intention was specifically on that 80 megawatt, not 80 megawatt per se. It's actually closer to 50, up to 50 megawatts. But we didn't get any responses. Similar thing happened beginning of the year. Late last year, we went out to tender. Our tender closed the first quarter of this year, because the previous tender didn't attract sufficient airtime. We went out to a tender where we took on finding a developer to take us through the hoops. And that tender was acquired by 41 entities, of which only 9 responded, and we followed the similar process to that. So, especially, I believe, especially for larger scale tenders, there is not sufficient platform to be able to bring all what is required to give us a proper chance at biting into this cake. We're currently busy, and we have had approval, and from Isera's side, we had approval for 10 megawatt solar. So we're currently in the process of developing a 10 megawatt solar, which will be part of our energy mix, internal energy mix. We have then gone out to tender for the developer, and we're busy with a pre-feasibility study for up to 50 megawatt tender on biomass as base load. So in short, that's what's happening on our side.
A round of applause, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Olof. As you make your submission, especially around the need or the appetite for bigger projects, you remind me of our biker slogan that says, go big or go home. So the private sector is hungry for some big bites. I'm glad the regulator is here, the ministry is here. So don't be afraid to cut bigger pieces. They are ready to chew. So now we are moving on to, I've seen my program director giving me a glance that I'm already going into my time, but yes, please count the 5-10 minutes that we lost in the beginning. But I'll try to be fast as we move on. So now we'll move on to Mr. Anthony Geldert, CEO Logico. 2 questions for you, sir. The first one is if you may tell us how will you assess the readiness of Eswatini private sector in actively participating in the green power transformation? And also, if you may touch base on the other aspect, is there any strong foundation for local companies to engage in competitive bidding process and contribute significantly to the green power supply chain in Eswatini. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Program Director, and ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I think my comments are going to build quite a lot on what the previous speaker had to say. And if I use the analogy of the soccer players earlier, we've got the team owner, the coach, the referee all sitting there. And as private sector, we feel like we are 22 soccer players running around the field without any guidelines, any rules, and anybody to talk to. And I really feel that as private sector, we are ready, we are able, we're capable, we have the balance sheets, and we want to participate. So we have the will, we have the want, and we want to participate. And I don't think it's only in the big projects, the 15 to 40, 80 megawatt. I think there's a lot of private sector that wants to participate in the small projects, the half or 1 megawatt space. And I was quite pleasantly surprised to hear that there's some thinking going on around that. But I think the private sector for the last 5 years has really been running around, not really knowing the rules, although they might be on somebody's website or forum somewhere, and a lot of people doing things without permission, without really knowing what to do, with putting things in play, and sometimes retrospectively having to comply with regulations. And so I'm going to talk to the regulations for a minute, if I may. I think that private sector like things simple. We don't like things overcomplicated. We don't like to have to apply to 2 different organizations for the same application, which is new. You'll probably all know that we now have to apply to EEC as well as ACERA to put a facility in place. And for private sector, we're saying, let's make things easier. Let's make it easier to get onto the soccer field and play. And how do we do that? So from the private sector's perspective, I do think that the private sector is ready and willing. I think that it would be a sad day if we saw any energy being produced by businesses from outside of the country. I think if we could make this all homegrown, we would be pleased to see that kind of initiative. And then just leading on to your second question, I think that there is the ability, and the previous speaker spoke about the ready and willingness to go into a competitive bidding process. And again, there's lots of companies in Eswatini that has the balance sheets as well as the manpower to be able to do this. So we look forward to a competitive landscape. I think the last thing that I would like to add from the business community is that as businesses, we compete with businesses in other SADC countries in various aspects. And a lot of those companies, whether it be in South Africa or in the other SADC countries, they are moving into their own power generation, which is making them more competitive as a business because it essentially becomes either an income stream or cost saving. And so the faster businesses are able to generate more power or all the power that they can, makes business more competitive and makes it more sustainable. And then certainly last but not least, thank you for keeping the lights on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Keldat. I think I picked 3 very important words in your first statement. We have the will, we have the want, and the balance sheet. So we are covered. So thank you very much for giving us that comfort, because it's one thing to say we want this, but our balance sheet does not really allow us, then it remains on our wish list. But if we get comfort of the 3, that you are willing, you want, and you also have the balance sheet, because it all boils down to economics. We can be inspired all we want, we can be motivated all we want. If the economics of it doesn't fall into space, then it will remain a wish list. Thank you very much for that, sir. Now we are turning to the very last one, and I got comfort from my moderator that the negotiation worked. So we'll still have almost sufficient time, I suppose, for the Q&A, because we still need to ask a few questions. Our speakers will still need to give us more. They cannot now just come here, tell us, and then they go away. We need to get as much information from them as possible. So that we do that, let me just hand over to Johan Roberts, who is our last but not least speaker. Mr. Roberts, I also have two questions for you. So from your perspective, what kind of support and capacity building do local Swati companies or Swazi companies need to effectively participate in the green power transformation? And the second dimension of the question is that what are the key interests and considerations for companies like Tabangulu Estates in terms of market visibility and seizing transformation opportunities? Over to you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nyan Bingele. That's afternoon for some of the others. After today, we've listened to a lot of things. We've been part of the pilot projects from the beginning. I have a small 1.5 megawatt system being installed by a local company. And I think we've gone through a lot of learning points. From the beginning, not really knowing where to go and knock and which door to kick down. But eventually we found a way, and as the previous speaker said, you don't really know where to go. But there are structures now in place. Because you're involved, we know. So I think we need to add a department to say, get involved. One thing I can say, learning points from our installation, whatever system you want to install, go and see another system like yours or what you are thinking of to go and install. Ask the questions. It's not easy. There are a lot of pitfalls. And training is one of the biggest things where we need support. If you can send people to already now get educated, not everyone knows this. As earlier this morning, they were talking about there's not enough people that can sign off things. It's very true. It's a battle in this space. Ourselves, we are there. All our generated power has been used by ourselves, but there are times over weekends, and so that we don't use everything. So we're eagerly waiting when can we start supplying into the grid. Everything is set up, and we think we've done all our homework so far. We should be ready at any time once the button is green. Biggest thing is if you have people in this area, from the manager down to the people working, they need to be passionate. It's one of the learning points that we've had. If they're not passionate about what they're doing about this, it seems like the younger, middle-aged generation is a bit better than us on the older side of the things. They are still eager, they want to do it, but it's not easy. We've seen it. Financing side, we've heard a lot of financing. Do your homework. Don't just grab the first person that comes around. There's a lot of support in that, in all areas. Just make sure what fit your balance sheet the best. And the longer you delay, it's a no-brainer to go for solar. But the longer you delay, the more it costs you. Over a space of 3 years, it cost us a huge amount more. System backup, that's about one of the biggest things that we need to be sure. Whatever system you go for, the Bakkie Brigade in South Africa is causing a lot of havoc. We should not allow the same here in Eswatini. They install and there's no backup. You phone the number tomorrow, this number is no more available. So let's not go there. There's enough support to get people trained here in our country so that we can support our country. Transformation, leaders who are still, as I said earlier, wants to move forward with this. Those are the guys that you need to get involved. Other opportunities that you do around our solar, we've planted grass. And instead of having brush cutters breaking the panels, we've got sheep grazing the area. It's not a big area, it's a 2-hectare plot, but at least there's 15, 20 sheep. Sometimes depends on the season. We have to bring in 30 sheep, and at least by Christmas time, we are all enjoying a piece. So there are other opportunities around the solar. Don't just look at, we've installed the irrigation system for the lawn. At the same time, we use the same irrigation system to wash the panels. Because the monitoring and the cleaning of these things is another story. We went to visit the EEC, 10 megawatt down in the south, and we asked them, do you wash your panels? They said, do you know what it will cost to wash these panels? Just to get water here. So you need to have a balance. When is the time to wash these, and do you really gain from it? You have to look at all those costs. So that's why I said earlier on, do your homework as much as you can. And what we found is people always open their doors. If you say, we want to come and have a look at this, the doors are open. People that are not shy to share information, especially the pitfalls. They quickly tell you those first. So from support, yeah, so far because we've been part of the pilot projects, I think we know more than the general person on the ground, and I would agree that you would need to make it known to people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. And if they did not open the doors, I would have advised them to, because from an early submission that you were looking for which door to kick down, I said, okay, that door shouldn't be a very important one. But yes, thank you very much for raising that one. And I'm glad that you are also bringing information that is sort of converging. It's very comforting for me that what was presented early in the day in terms of the professionals being scarce is also what you are experiencing. It becomes very challenging if in one event, two different aspects, they have converging, or I mean to say diverging data or views. But for this one, at least we are all in agreement that this is the problem. And then the next thing is to try and find out a solution to that. So at this point, I don't know, Mr. Program Director, how you had planned to do it, but we can be taking questions, and our distinguished panelists will be taking notes. I think we'll take a round of 3 each, and then we give them some time to respond. Let's see by a show of hands. But before we do that, let's give them a big round of applause for their contribution. Okay, that feels better now. Let's then ask for more after we have thanked them this much. Oh, it looks like everything was crystal clear. Oh, we can go home now. But not so fast. I'm sure there is a couple of questions. Or maybe whilst our distinguished participants are trying to get around the questions, there were also submissions that were made by private sector, which maybe the regulator would want to provide clarity on, either Director Energy or CEO Esera, in terms of what the private sector has raised. Maybe we can start there while the panelist is dealing with what we had between 1:45 and 1:45. Thank you, CEO. Please go ahead.
I'll be very brief, and I think one must actually accept that if private sector doesn't know which door to go to, it's actually a serious concern for any country. And we take this as feedback. more than anything else, Sakolo. But we just do want to say that we would not like to be seen as an obstacle, but as a facilitator. Certainly we volunteer ourselves and remain available to private sector. I think we find it extremely important to say it here. I don't want to speak on behalf of the director, because in as much this is the kind of spirit we've been speaking to, each time anybody would like to see us, we also make sure that we are available in this format, notwithstanding that we are a regulator, but we avail ourselves. But I think we'd like to give private sector that 100% assurance. And I think that where there seems to be another layer of regulation on top of regulation, because I sort of piqued that concern that you want to go to one point and be serviced. I think we will want to take that opportunity and reflect and engage further with private sector to make sure we eliminate that process, because it really takes everyone back. I thought we should respond that way, sir.
Thank you very much, CEO. And it's comforting to learn that we are already thinking improving efficiency going forward, because private sector has limited time on their hand, or rather the opportunity cost is very high, so they would want to get the most out of the 24 hours that we have each day. Hence, they are called the drivers of the economy. So they don't want to drive the economy moving around in circles. So any questions, ideas, even if there are contributions, it doesn't have to be a question. Even if it's just additions and comments, it doesn't have to be a question necessarily. Oh, there is a hand over there.
Hello, everyone. My question is directed to the CEO of EEC. I'd like to know, what has EEC done to help the private sector, or what has EEC done to give the private sector of Swaziland an advantage over foreign companies? Thank you.
So do we have another question? I then been reliably advised that we can have just one round. So if your question doesn't feature in this round, then we won't be able to take it. So I go once, I go twice. Close. You have a question, Kosi?
South Africa. He says, I think if I was sitting up there, I wouldn't know how to tackle it. He says, what does it do for the private sector, and what advantage they give to the private sector as opposed to foreign companies? So I was thinking, you remember the private sector here are all companies registered in the country. Different investors from here and elsewhere, but by virtue of their registration here, they are considered local businesses, right? Even though they may be partially or foreign owned. So I want to get this question clear before any of them starts answering the wrong thing. Would you be so kind as to repeat that question so that I can understand?
Okay.
And pass it on.
Thank you for that. Please go ahead.
Okay, let me ask it like this. What competitive advantage does EEC give to Swazi companies, or any company that works in Swaziland, that company wouldn't receive elsewhere? What competitive advantage does EEC give companies in Swaziland that a company would choose to work in Swaziland rather than work in South Africa or Mozambique or Botswana?
Okay, that's clear.
Yes.
Yeah, no load shedding. I'll give you the answer, no load shedding.
Dr. Sakolo, we also have another question this side.
Oh, okay. Please give the question an opportunity.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to find out, because I heard the EEC Managing Director mentioning the base load. I would like to understand what it is in terms of the resources that are being looked at to create that base load. Obviously, renewable energy would be ideal, but it may not be realistic. So what is it that the country is looking at as far as the resources to generate that base load that we need as a country?
Okay, thank you for that. Any question? Let's see, Valela ngaphandle. Oh, there is a hand over there. Oh, yes. Please, I forgot. Please introduce yourself as you start the question.
Thank you very much. My name is Walter Lamini. I'm from Netcom. Question is directed to EEC. Yes. Thank you very much for the information that you have given us today since morning. EEC, we've realized that you are just behind us. You are supporting us. Thank you very much for that. I understand that EEC is still not believing in solar that much, but I promise you, we will prove you right. We will prove that solar is the next best thing that is happening in this country. So, thank you so much for that part. But then my question is, I've had access to the forms that we have to, because we have already done a few installations as Netcom, private installations, that is homes, that we need to register, we need to comply. Our motto is on compliance. We are very critical on compliance because it saves us a lot of money, and it can save us a lot of money through the business that you can lose if your system fails due to a wrong installation or a lack of compliance. So I just want to know what the deadline is, or when are we supposed to comply? Because customers are already asking us, some of our customers are here, they're already asking us, when are you coming with the forms so that you can fill them and then submit to EEC, so that when anything happens to our inverters or anything, batteries that we have installed, we're able to accompany that form to claim a warranty as the inverter is shipped to South Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have just one final one at the back.
Okay, final. Final, that one.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Bongmenzi Lamini. My question is directed to the Director of Energy in the Ministry. So I heard she spoke about all the policies and regulations that as the Ministry have developed. But then my question is that in terms of enterprise development, because I believe policy should provide an enabling environment. So in that sense, it means that as a ministry, they also need to look into the space of ensuring that they promote enterprise development programs for Eswatini, especially because we are saying that with renewable energy coming in place, let's make sure that Eswatini, they also participate in across the entire value chain of energy. So in terms of being innovative policy-wise, or bring about strategies of ensuring that there are going to be enterprise development programs for the ordinary Eswatini, what is it that the minister is doing to cater for that? Thank you.
Okay, last two. There's a gentleman over there, and there's a lady this side. Yes.
Plaxon, and I'm from Quality Engineering. We're down in the Lubombo region. Thank you to the panel for speaking. I did sense the frustration from the private sector development on the left-hand side, and there seems to be a bit of a divide. I just wondered whether, and sorry for directing this at you, Mr. Lamini, because you're not on the panel, but is it possible that Business Eswatini could facilitate a workshop which would act as a catalyst towards bridging the gap that we experienced earlier? Olaf, I know that you mentioned that some projects were holding back larger projects. Is it possible that there could be some mediation, perhaps a release on the larger 80 megawatt project? Is it just so that when we're catching up this time next year, we're not talking about the same thing.
The final question.
Thanks so much. Phoebe Sullivan from USA Power Africa. We've been following and supporting the government of Malawi in the adoption of a large-scale battery storage solution that will help them deliver ancillary services to all of the new solar that they've brought online, and as a way to kind of break into renewables as a baseload service as well. And I was wondering if Malawi was, or rather if Eswatini was considering doing something similar in the battery storage space. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I was getting a little bit scared that this became my forum rather than a sector forum. All the questions being directed to the EEC. But of course, I'm used to it. Everybody, every day, whenever they have an outage, they call EEC. And anybody that wants to come and invest in the country, they go to EEC. So there is nothing new to that. Now, there was a first question which relates to the competitive advantage that EEC offers to businesses in the country. I think I'm going to answer this question from two angles. I'll answer the question, first of all, from the angle of a client to the EEC. Now, in the current reality is that the people believe that electricity in the country is expensive. It depends from which angle you are looking at and from which source of data you are looking at. Now, we believe that as EEC, we do our best to empower the Eswatini economy with competitive electricity pricing. And to the extent that even our sources of electricity have been very accommodative to our negotiating teams when we negotiate the purchasing prices, so that we can keep the electricity price in the country as affordable as possible. The second angle comes from the supplier point of view. We've recognized that the majority of our clients here sitting next to me as well are becoming prosumers. So the categorization that we have currently needs to transform so that we have a category for prosumers, that is producers and consumers. Now, what we do, again there, we have a strategic initiative to collaborate with key clients that have capacity and capability. And we do so with our team, and making sure that whatever you do is not going to derail our project, is also not going to be an impediment on your side. So we give you all the necessary information that you need. We do system studies to enable you to understand where in the grid you can connect as a prosumer, and how much you need to connect as a prosumer. I'm sure you now have a clear understanding from the earlier presentations made this morning that we have collaborated with the regulator to bring about a framework that allows for a fair pricing for all our prosumers who will be supplying into the grid and also consuming from the grid. The second question relates to base load. And when you speak about base load, you are speaking about a power plant that has capability to maintain the inertia in the grid so that there is grid stability. Now, we have done sufficient studies to determine current technologies that are available. I understand that the whole world shrinks when you speak about coal. But the reality is that other than the cost to society, particularly health and everything else as a result of mining, as well as a result of emissions, we are looking at what can be done with the coal that we have, and what technologies can we implement to limit the emissions to acceptable levels. Again, the current reality is that in Southern Africa, we generate about, or rather in Africa, we generate about 2% of the total world emissions, and yet we suffer the most. If the Northern Hemisphere were to halve their emissions, we could live in a better world. Now, secondly, we take the comfort in that an opportunity has been provided for developing countries to look at gas as a transition technology to provide base load. However, once again, we have to be very careful in what we wish for, because once again, when we talk about gas, there is a price tag for gas that we are better for us, and we keep on this path of zero emission on all electricity generated in the country. As you might understand, EEC generates from hydro as well as solar. There is also a question about deadline for compliance. Our point of view is that we are not going to connect you into the grid until you have complied. So it pays for you to plan for compliance ahead of time. And thank you very much for the compliment that you have made earlier on about the services that we provide. I just need to mention that we have 2 solar systems in the country. A mini grid system that has a complete battery that can run for 4 days, and we have a utility system that has a 1 megawatt hour battery. And we are monitoring the performance of the battery as well as the performance of the system during the day. And that provides us with data on what we can do with battery storage. Thank you.
Thank you, MD. I think Director, you might have something to say before we. I think the private sector also has some questions. Is it? It goes to Mlangen. Okay. Director, do you have something?
On my question.
On your question?
Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sakolo. The question on the enterprises development. This is a very pertinent question. There is a number of programs that we are working on that are targeted for the enterprises. Maybe I missed that in my presentation. Starting with capacitating enterprises, we're working with the University of Eswatini, the Research Center on Renewable Energy. They have trained individuals on the handling of renewable energy. Recently we also work with UNDP. They've trained even women. So the capacitation is there, and those then, once trained, they are able to form even companies, and then they can then respond to tenders for renewable energy. For instance, I talked about solar home systems that we are now moving into in terms of the electrification. Those solar home systems will be handled. We're looking into, the small businesses handling those. Soon we'll be issuing tenders for the solar home systems, and including the solar water pumping systems. There are tenders that will be coming out, and we are looking into having the enterprises taking those projects. There is another one on ready boards installations, because as a ministry we have, as we implement the electrification, there are those households that are unable to wire, because for you to access, for us to say you have access to electricity, you must have wired. So some households, you find that the infrastructure is there, because they are unable to raise funding for wiring, then they will not have access. So what we are doing now, we're assisting those households in terms of installing ready boards, so that they are also able to access. So those ready boards is a program. They will be implemented by small. Actually, it's not even small businesses. It's qualifying individuals in their respective communities. So if we get to that community, we find that there are these households that we need to install ready boards for, and then there are qualifying electricians, then we'll be using those to install. So that way, there's a component, they'll be working with those intending to then qualify, so that they get the experience, and then as a ministry will then upgrade them in terms of going for a trade testing, so that way they are then capacitated. The mini grid framework as well is looking into the role of the private sector. It will be the private sector developing the mini grids, and also are working with the Ministry of Commerce to then see what sort of businesses can then be introduced in those respective communities. That way, we want to address the aspect of the productive use of, non-productive use of electricity, so that the electricity does not go there only to be used for the lights, but at least it should generate businesses for the communities. And then with the bigger projects, the procurement of the 75 megawatts, the 40 megawatts, those projects handled by Esera, there is also a component there talking to the minimum participation of the locals, Eswatini, 20% for both shareholding and even debt. So we are trying, as we move, we are trying to ensure that we include everyone, and in the process we empower even small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director. I think the last one goes to CEO Business Eswatini, please, Ngozi.
I think I probably even forgot the question, but I think it has to do with as if there was a sort of a schism between government and the private sector, wasn't it? Like a separation. Oh, yeah, it was. I just want to refute that with the contempt it deserves. Somebody taught me this, the contempt it deserves. I don't know what it means, but I said it because I think it sounds nice. Well, I think I read it somewhere, whatever, but it does sound kind of smart. Yes, there used to be one, I will agree, some sort of schism that was very, very huge, by the way, at some point in time. And in recent times, it has narrowed quite significantly to the point I'm thinking we're all singing from the same song sheet. But we need to accept that there are still differences, not of a fundamental nature anymore, but there are more logistics, really. Who does what, when. I'm thinking we're very much more aligned, and I have no reason not to look forward to the future with keen anticipation, just based on the realigned level of thinking. Secondly, I think I did mention to you that there's this elephant in the room, and you need to accept it as such, this cross-subsidization of pricing. If you said the private sector companies, hey, you go all your way out, who's going to subsidize the 40% when we have so much social disorder? I mean, to create a revolution, that's what you would do. So please, we have to be alive to some of these sort of grown-up issues, some of which are very hard to discuss, and also at the same time be sympathetic to the frustrations of the private sector, because they're always looking for the least cost route in achieving things in order to create value for the consumer, and indeed for them to be able to hold their own within the international markets. So we appreciate all of that, but I can't say I shouldn't appreciate on behalf of the private sector what you, EEC, what you regulator have been doing and talking to us. He's recommending at some point in time we have an Indaba. Yes, I say yes to that. Let's do that in order just to fast track this conversation to another level. But I'm thinking something this year is about to, something good is going to happen. I don't want to sound prophetic, but I've never been wrong anyway. Something is about to happen. I do sound like a prophet. I was about to say, can you sow a seed in me before you go today? Anyway, I think we're due for a break, Dr. Antwi.
Yes, Uncle.
Yes, please
just
release
in the
us.
next 2 minutes. Yes. Thank you very much. I think this one deserves a round of applause. The submission, including, yeah. Thank you very much. This brings us to 5 minutes towards the end of this session. Before I close, I would want to agree with CEO. Particularly, this is the kind of mentality, the positivity that took the economy through the hard times brought about by COVID. The private sector was so optimistic, like they were so positive that the future is still bright against all odds. And this is the spirit. That's why we achieved this resilience. That's why we achieved way better than other countries in the region. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the very vibrant discussions. Director Energy, you did not only shed light on the government policy, but you've just shined a high beam on the policies and strategies that government is bringing into the picture or into the sector. Mr. Tsabedze, you regulated our thoughts and minds as efficient as we regulate the energy sector. We really appreciate that one. Babem Konda, thank you very much for bringing us to the understanding that there are several dimensions that we are trying to achieve, including affordability, access, and all the other beautiful dimensions. That tells us that EEC is not only here to just connect us to the grid, but they are also it's a utility with a heart. So we are really appreciative of that. When it comes to Mr. Olof, what you gave us as views, the S-Suite as your product that you produce at the sugar company. So we are very grateful for that. And just to give us comfort that the private sector or the sugar industry has the capabilities to give us what it takes going forward. And Mr. Gerard, you have proven that the private sector in Eswatini is ready to play the game, but also ready to power it. So playing it is one thing, but powering it is something else. So you've gave us assurance that you are ready, willing, and you want to be part of the game. Finally, Mr. Roberts, we have very refreshing thoughts that you shared with us. We have sown seeds of thoughts on how grassroots of efforts of capacity building can blossom into greener, more sustainable energy in Eswatini. I really appreciate your insights. Our program director was very right when he said we have very capable panelists. You've proven him right on that regard. And then I will turn to our participants. Thank you very much for defying the odds that are brought by the heavy lunch that we have and participate keenly in this particular engagement and all the beautiful questions that you've asked and all the beautiful insights that you've raised. I think one last round of applause goes to yourself for your keen attention and participation to this one. With me, thank you very much, and please find it in your heart to forgive me for any mischievous or anything that I did which was not expected. I hope, since yesterday was Sunday, or forgiveness is still on the high side on your part. So please, thank you very much. I'll hand back to our program director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much to our panelists. May we please give our panelists another round of applause. And another round of applause for our capable moderator, Dr. Sakolo. Siyabonga kakhulu. These have been meaningful conversations, and I'd like to invite you just for a 20-minute tea. 20-minute tea is served outside, and we will be back at 4:05.